For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. Flying is a test of trust. The machine is one of man's greatest inventions, but it's only as reliable as the hands that guide it. A skilled pilot knows the weight of responsibility that rests in their grip, understanding that a single miscalculation in judgment or arrogance in the face of nature's might can turn a smooth journey into a descent of chaos. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness, where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For Lauren Elder, her flight would be a nightmare. In 1976, 29-year-old Lauren Elder, an artist from San Francisco, made a last-minute decision to join a sightseeing flight. On the morning of April 26th in Oakland, California, Lauren stood on the tarmac at a private airfield, watching as Dr. Jay Fuller, the pilot, uncovered a small Cessna aircraft. The flight was a spontaneous opportunity. Initially, her boyfriend was supposed to fly with Fuller and his girlfriend Jean, but when he had to cancel, Lauren agreed to go in his place. The plan was a simple day trip to Death Valley, a desert region 300 miles southeast just beyond the Sierra Nevada. They would fly in, stop for a picnic, and return home before dark. Until that moment, Lauren had been excited, but as she stood on the tarmac, she suddenly had second thoughts. Dr. Fuller had rented the single-engine aircraft and was already busy preparing the plane. As Lauren hesitated, she felt an overwhelming sense of panic and a strong intuition that she shouldn't go. She wasn't typically a nervous flyer, having flown before even with her father, who was a pilot. But this uneasy feeling was hard to shake. Despite her misgivings, she decided not to back out, suppressing her instincts. She steeled herself, walked through the hangar, and climbed into the back seat of the plane. Fuller, 36, was a veterinarian and Lauren's boyfriend's boss. His calm confidence helped ease Lauren's anxiety as they taxied down the runway. Jean, sitting in the front, turned and smiled at Lauren. She appeared relaxed and at ease. Lauren didn't know Jean well. They had only been on a group sailing trip together months before. Still, Jean seemed excited to be part of this adventure. As the plane gained speed, crosswinds buffeted the wings, making the takeoff bumpy. Despite the initial nerves, Lauren was excited, snapping photos of the farmland stretching out below them. After an hour, they were coming upon the Sierra Nevadas. This mountain range runs along the eastern edge of California, with a small portion extending into Nevada. This iconic range is known for its stunning landscapes, diverse ecosystems, rich geological history, and towering peaks, some reaching over 14,000 feet or 4,000 meters. Shaped over millions of years by volcanic activity and tectonic forces, the Sierra Nevada's iconic peaks and valleys were carved through uplift and erosion. The range's granite formations, especially those in Yosemite, are particularly famous, with Mount Whitney as the highest peak in the contiguous United States. They passed over the great sequoia forests and flew over the dramatic granite gorges of Kings Canyon. Lauren shivered slightly, realizing she was underdressed for the high-altitude cold, wearing only a light jacket and skirt. After 2 hours in the air, Jay announced they were nearing Kearsarge Pass, a high point in the Sierra Nevada, but he made a critical error. Instead of taking the left-hand canyon indicated on the map towards Kearsarge Pass, where a small aircraft like the Cessna can fly over at 11,709 feet or 3,568 meters, the plane veered to the right, heading into a deep basin surrounded by towering mountains toward Mount Bradley, a 13,270-foot or 4,044-meter peak, a pass a single-engine airplane would struggle to pass over. Lauren's ears popped as she leaned forward, trying to spot the pass herself, but all she could see was a towering granite wall. Still, Jay seemed unconcerned, pointing to a small gap in the mountains ahead. Lauren sits in the back seat with Dr. Fuller and Jean in front of her. She suspects Jay is showing off a bit as the plane swoops and glides through valleys and canyons. What Lauren didn't know was that Jay, with just 213 hours of flight experience and only 46 hours in this type of aircraft, this section of the Sierra Nevada, home to the highest peaks in the contiguous U.S., posed a significant challenge, especially for their Cessna, which struggled to climb in the thin, turbulent air. Unbeknownst to Lauren, no flight plan had been filed, no one knew exactly where they were, and he just made a catastrophic mistake. Lauren peers out the aircraft's window, watching as the forested foothills gradually give way to the rugged alpine slopes. The plane shakes and trembles in the turbulence, feeling so light that it lifts and drops with each gust of wind. Soon, they're flying alongside the towering snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Lauren grabs her camera, eager to capture the breathtaking views. The peaks rise in every direction, still covered in snow. To get better shots, she unbuckles her seatbelt, sliding from one side of the plane to the other, snapping photos of the dramatic scenery with each twist and turn. Despite maintaining a steady altitude, the mountains seem to rise higher and higher around them as they fly into an area where the peaks reach 14,000 feet. Lauren glances at Jay, searching for any sign of concern, but he appears calm, pointing out landmarks, and Jean seems entirely at ease. Trying to settle her nerves, Lauren continues to take pictures, focusing her camera on the vast canyon below. As she looks out, Lauren suddenly notices a massive wall of rock looming uncomfortably close to the window. Jay, still unfazed, tells them to brace for a jolt as they cross the crest line, explaining that the air behaves like a wave, rising and falling as it flows over the mountain. He assures them that an even more spectacular view lies beyond the peak. But Lauren isn't feeling excited. To her, the granite wall ahead looks alarmingly high and far too close for comfort. As they entered a box canyon, it became clear that the crest line was above them, not below as they had expected. Suddenly, the situation turned dire. Lauren glanced out the window and saw only a sheer wall of rock. Jay, still calm, warned them they would feel a jolt as they cleared the crest, but the plane struggled to climb, the engine whining as it banked steeply. This would be the last thing Lauren Elder would remember. Lauren Elder opens her eyes, still seated in the back of the Cessna, but her surroundings are now entirely different. The sides of the plane are crumpled inward, and a light flurry of snow drifts through the shattered windows. She glances to her right and sees that the plane is precariously resting on a mountain ridge. As her vision clears, she looks toward the front of the aircraft. The altimeter is broken, but the needle reads 13,200 feet. Jay is slumped over, and Jean, the pilot's girlfriend, is also motionless. Jay, still gripping the yoke, turns to Lauren with a dazed expression, his face bloodied and filled with confusion. The silence is overwhelming. Lauren doubles over in pain, realizing her right shin bone is exposed from a deep gash. Looking up, she sees Jay, who's covered in dried blood, trying to speak to her. It dawns on her that they've been in a severe accident. The details slowly sink in, one by one, adding up to the harsh reality. Jay has a severe head wound, and his eyes are distant and glassy. "Can you get out? Can you move? I need your help getting Jean out of the plane," he asks, seemingly convinced they need to get her out and onto the ground. Lauren checks her body, feeling pain but realizing that, despite her injuries, she can still function. Her arm is badly swollen and likely broken, but she's able to move. Gathering her strength, she forces the aircraft door open, and the frigid mountain air hits her face. It's only when she clambers down and steps back from the wreckage that she comprehends how lucky she is. The wrecked plane is teetering on a 45-degree slope, wedged in loose rock and scree just 20 feet or 6 meters below the summit of Mount Bradley, the peak they almost cleared. The plane is bent in half at the wings, not fully broken, and while Jay and Jean were thrown against the dashboard by the impact, Lauren's position in the back seat spared her from the worst of it. Lauren helps Jay lift Jean from her seat, realizing she's critically injured, possibly with damage to her spine or neck. Carefully, Lauren braces herself on the steep slope, placing Jean's head in her lap and cradling her. Jean is convulsing, unable to speak, but Lauren holds her tightly, trying to offer comfort. Jean's feet are bare and turning blue. She had worn flip-flops for the trip to the desert. Lauren takes off her own socks and puts them on Jean, but there's little more she can do. Lauren bombards Jay with questions, but he's confused and disoriented. "Is the radio working?" she asks. Jay struggles to respond, admitting that it's not. "Do we have an emergency locator?" she presses. Again, Jay doesn't think it's functioning. He didn't file a flight plan in his hurry, and no one knows where they are. "Do we have blankets?" Lauren asks, but there are none. Realizing the gravity of their situation, Lauren's sense of urgency deepens. With no first aid kit or emergency supplies, they're in a dire situation. Leaving Jay and Jean for a moment, Lauren climbs to the summit of the mountain to assess their location. From the top, she peers over the edge of the ridge and sees the steep drop on the other side. It's a razor-thin crest, and she realizes how fortunate they were to crash on the west side of the mountain. Had they gone over the ridge, they would have plunged thousands of feet to the desert below. As Lauren surveys the landscape, she spots familiar landmarks and recognizes the valley below. She knows there's a highway nearby, not more than 10 miles away. It's a small glimmer of hope. Returning to the crash site, Lauren finds Jay slumped against the crumpled door of the plane, his face blackened from injury. "We need to start a fire," she insists, knowing the temperature is dropping rapidly. They have no matches, but Lauren comes up with an idea to use the cigarette lighter from the plane's dashboard. Thankfully, it still works. She starts burning whatever she can find, including maps from the plane, but the fire barely sustains. Then, Lauren notices a small gasoline leak from the wing and collects it in empty beer bottles. She and Jay take turns tossing small amounts of fuel onto the fire, building it up to keep warm. Lauren even arranges rocks around the fire to create a makeshift heater. Jay, increasingly disoriented, tries to help but is clearly suffering from internal injuries. Despite their efforts, the fire is fragile, and Lauren's focus is split between keeping the fire alive and checking on Jean, who is slipping away. Eventually, Jean stops responding altogether, and it becomes clear she won't survive the night. Lauren and Jay understand they can do nothing more for her. As night falls, Jean's body disappears from where they had placed her. Lauren and Jay search the slope in the darkness, calling out for her, but she's nowhere to be found. Did she have another seizure and fall down the mountain? Or did she somehow stumble off into the night? There's no way to know, and they return to the fire, chilled by the loss. Throughout the freezing night, Lauren struggles to keep Jay awake and engaged. He becomes increasingly quiet and withdrawn. His speech is slurred as he loses body heat. To keep him alert, Lauren tries to sing, pulling every folk song and spiritual she can remember, encouraging Jay to join in, but his responses are minimal. Lauren doesn't yet realize that Jay is suffering from severe internal bleeding, and despite the fire, his body is shutting down. As the long, cold hours drag on, Lauren finds herself taking charge, doing everything she can to keep them both alive. Elder found herself caring for Jay as well as for herself. She was sure he blamed himself. Crippled by guilt over what had happened, the situation created a role reversal. She had expected him to be the authority figure, the one with medical knowledge who knew what to do. But in reality, Jay was slipping away, becoming more helpless each passing hour. As the night wore on and the temperature dropped well below freezing, they poured the last of the gasoline onto their fire, but it began to sputter and fade. Darkness threatened to engulf them completely. Yet once again, Lauren fought off despair and switched into survival mode. When a gust of wind blew out the fire, plunging them into pitch-black cold, she thought, "This is it." But then she realized the rocks near the fire had absorbed enough heat to provide some warmth. She began transferring the hot rocks into the tail section of the plane and urged Jay to join her. Together they huddled in the tail, placing warm rocks between their feet, thighs, and under their arms. It was surprisingly comfortable, given the circumstances. Throughout the night, Lauren made sure to prod Jay, keeping him conscious and as warm as possible. But as the hours passed, Jay became increasingly delirious. By the time dawn began to break over the mountains, he was in visible distress. He started to thrash and struggle, insisting, "I've got to get out of here! I've got to get out of here!" Despite her efforts to calm him, Jay grew quieter and quieter until he became completely still. At first, Lauren didn't think much of it, but then she realized something was wrong. Reaching up, she felt for a pulse but found none. Panicking, she checked for signs of breathing and quickly realized that Jay was gone. It's just after daybreak on Tuesday, April 27, 1976. Inside the wrecked plane, Lauren Elder lies beside Jay's body. She is exhausted, distraught, and utterly alone. In her hypothermic state, she feels drowsy, almost detached. A fleeting thought crosses her mind. She could drift off to sleep and let go. But then, a vivid image of her mother and grandmother appears in her mind, as if they're telling her not to give up. This vision, whether real or imagined, becomes a source of strength. With renewed determination, Lauren forces herself into action. She takes Jay's socks, pulls them on, and climbs out of the plane as the sun rises over the desert, allowing her to get warm while she contemplates her next move. Lauren knows she won't survive another night out here. There must be a search for them, but she can't be sure they'll find her in time. She needs to take matters into her own hands. Lauren scrambles back up to the crest of Mount Bradley to survey the landscape again. Below her lies the deepest valley in the United States, and beyond it, the fringes of the Mojave Desert. If she can make it down the mountain and reach the interstate highway, she might find help. As she looks again, she spots a dried-out stream bed running along a canyon that could lead her out of the mountains. But to get there, she'll have to descend nearly 3,000 feet, or 900 meters down a near vertical incline, navigating through snow, loose rock, and boulders. Determined, Lauren begins to mentally plot a route. It looks feasible, she thinks, connecting the stepping stones of boulders in her mind. Action, she decides, is better than sitting and waiting. At around 7 a.m., she begins her descent. Even a seasoned climber with proper gear would find this climb treacherous, but Lauren is wearing high-heeled boots and a woolen skirt. She improvises using a method where she punches through the ice-crusted snow, crawling on all fours and zigzagging from one rock formation to the next. After hours of painstaking effort, Lauren reaches a 100-foot drop. In a typical year, this would be a raging waterfall, but the dry conditions mean it's navigable. She removes her boots, tucks the socks inside, and drops them over the edge, knowing she'll need her bare hands and feet to climb down. She clings to the rock, hard in her throat, slowly descending. The sight of tree branches lodged in crevices provides makeshift ladders at times. As her confidence builds with each successful step, she continues downward despite the occasional realization of a steep drop ahead. Lauren is filled with adrenaline, barely feeling the pain from her broken arm. What surprises her most is the exhilaration she feels. Despite the danger, she's reminded of how she's always trusted her instincts and her physical abilities, and she knows where her limits are. I've made it this far, she thinks. I can make it the rest of the way. Her excitement grows as she progresses, almost as if she's enjoying the challenge. By early afternoon, after 5 or 6 hours of climbing, Lauren descended several thousand feet and cleared the most difficult part of the journey, but the effort has taken its toll. She hasn't eaten, and apart from a few sips from a stream, she hasn't drunk anything since the previous morning. The adrenaline that has sustained her begins to fade, and as the gradient eases, her exhaustion grows. She no longer needs to rock climb, but as she navigates through rocky crags and slides down scree slopes, her head starts spinning. At the bottom of the vertical bowl, Lauren's mind begins to play tricks on her. She experiences hallucinations, visions of Christ-like figures silhouetted against the sky. Some seem spiritual, almost as if they are there to encourage her, while others feel like mere figments of hope, her mind projecting images of safety, like a house or a road. Despite the hallucinations, she presses on one careful step at a time. As the sun begins to set around 7 p.m., casting a warm orange glow over Owens Valley, Lauren continues her descent, now walking barefoot. At some point during her journey, after removing her boots for a short break, she lost them. Yet, despite the challenges and the hallucinations, Lauren remains focused on her goal, reaching help before it's too late. Elder isn't sure when, but eventually the ice and scree of the mountains begin to level out into the dust and scrub of the desert floor. Now, Lauren just keeps moving forward, step by step, heading toward a string of lights on the horizon. Finally, around 10 p.m., 14 hours after leaving the crash site, Lauren reaches the lights. She had doubts if they were real, believing she was hallucinating again. Lauren is not just near a highway. She has emerged on the outskirts of the small desert town of Independence, California, with a motel in sight. Overwhelmed with relief, she staggers to the motel, thinking the end is finally in sight. She knocks on the door, and the man who answers stares at her bewildered. Lauren, despite trying to clean herself up, is covered in dirt, sweat, and blood. Barely able to speak, she manages to ask to use the telephone, explaining that she's been in an accident and needs help. "No, I'm sorry. I can't help you," he says. Lauren, desperate, asks if there's anywhere else she can go. He suggests another motel at the other end of town. She limps over to the next motel, goes through her story again, and is denied as well. Exhausted and disheartened, Lauren remembers a decrepit old hotel she saw with a light on. She heads there and finds an elderly couple at the front desk. They are hard of hearing, and though she tries to shout, she no longer has the energy. Lauren can see the fear in their faces. They don't understand what she's saying. Just when things seem like they couldn't get any worse, the town sheriff walks into the room. At first, Lauren thinks she will be arrested, but to her relief, the sheriff believes her. He recognizes that she's the survivor of the plane crash they'd been searching for and is there to help. Finally, Lauren is safe. The sheriff, knowing about the search efforts, is amazed that, against all odds, Lauren made it down the mountain. He drives her to the hospital in the next town. There, the doctor stitches the gash on her leg, treats her mild frostbite, and confirms her arm is fractured. Several of her teeth will need to be capped. Hospital staff, along with Lauren's father, a former Navy pilot, are stunned that she survived such a harrowing ordeal. Her father arrives the next day, having gone to bed the previous night, assuming she hadn't made it. As an experienced pilot, he knew the grim odds after a plane crash. But Lauren's mother, who had a deep spiritual connection, had always believed her daughter was still alive, feeling a psychic bond with her throughout the ordeal. Nonetheless, her father was the first to arrive, deeply relieved to see his daughter safe. Lauren is reunited with her family at the hospital, while an Air Force helicopter lands near the crest of Mount Bradley to recover the wreckage. Sadly, as suspected, Jean did not survive. Her body was found 120 feet or 36 meters below the plane, having rolled down the mountainside in the darkness. Jay remained in the wreckage, his hair dusted with snow. The county coroner later informed Lauren that Jay's death was hastened by a ruptured spleen and internal bleeding, along with hypothermia. Later, Lauren learned why the people of Independence had reacted to her with fear. Many had mistakenly thought she was part of the notorious Manson family cult. Years earlier, members of the cult had been brought to the town, and the women, wild-eyed and barefoot, roamed freely. Locals feared that another cult member had returned. In the days that followed, some of those who had turned her away came to the hospital to ask for forgiveness, which Lauren readily granted. "I didn't hold a grudge," she reflected, understanding their fear. Lauren Elder's survival is a remarkable story of courage and unwavering determination. When the plane fell from the sky and left her stranded on a desolate mountainside, it would have been easy to give in to fear and despair, but Lauren didn't. Bruised, broken, and alone, she faced the impossible, scaling down the treacherous mountain to find help. Her climb down the mountain was a journey of triumph, proving that we are capable of extraordinary things. Over the decades, Lauren Elder has had time to reflect on the accident. She attributes her survival to a deep emotional and spiritual connection with her mother and grandmother, believing it kept her going, stating, "I do believe that there are other levels to reality than the ones that we experience day to day. I had an experience that was a gift in terms of being able to refer when things get really tough. I can always refer back to this experience and go, yeah, there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture that we may not always be aware of, but there are multiple dimensions to reality and that there isn't just one story. And sometimes we're privileged to be able to see beyond the veil." It's natural to doubt whether you'll survive a nightmarish ordeal, but true courage is about moving forward despite the fear. In those moments when survival seems uncertain, the instinct to give up may feel overwhelming. Yet, deep inside all of us is a primal strength, a will to survive that awakens when we're pushed to the edge. When your body aches, when your mind is filled with doubts, it's your determination to keep going one step at a time that will carry you through. In facing the terror head-on and pushing through the impossible, you not only save your life, you discover what you're truly capable of. Survival isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing tall in spite of the fear, finding the courage to fight back when every part of you wants to surrender. Courage is the flame that keeps burning, even in the darkest moments, proving that survival isn't just about the body. It's about the strength of the human will to survive an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.